Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we're taking a look at the Bandai Tamashii Nations SH Monsterarts Destroyah Evolution set. Or, I guess I should say Destroyer. This was a pack of 3 different figures. We get the crab form of Destroyah, the aggregate form, and the flying form. And these are the 3 larger steps leading up to the final form, which I've already reviewed. And potentially that microscopic version of Destroyah is included in this pack as well. I just really can't tell. I don't have a microscope handy. But let's go ahead and take a look at the figures we can actually see. And we're going to start off by taking a look at the crab form. And this I actually feel is one of the most versatile versions of Destroyah we get here in the Evolution pack, because it actually represents 2 different versions. Now I called it the crab form, which is what it's mostly known as in the film, but this version I have it kind of mocked up as right now is what I believe is actually a decent representation of the juvenile form of Destroyah. Taking a look at the figure, you can see the head, very similar to the adult form. A lot of really good detail for how small this is. A lot of great color variation going from a very deep blood red to this kind of very whitish edge to the mouth. And all the spikes and mandibles coming out. There's little yellow eyes in there. Some great texturing going down his spine. Get some of these bigger spikes here at the shoulders. 2 little crab claws coming off the back. I have his pronged tail back here. Just very nice looking. On each side he has 3 big legs, very crustacean shaped, very armored looking, even some nice detail on the joints. And then we have a bunch of very, very small legs down here, and a very open spot here at the middle. Now this figure comes with some extra parts, or people might say is supposed to have parts that I took off. There are 2 little crab claws that could be added to the front, and 2 larger, more spindly legs that can come off the top. And this makes it much more closely resemble the aggregate form, just in a smaller size. This is more what we see in the film when Destroyer kind of becomes a bunch of smaller little creatures and attacks Burning Godzilla. So this is the look from that, and I'll show later he actually does perch on Burning Godzilla pretty well. Unfortunately, we only have 1 because it would be nice to have an army of them, but I feel like this figure is actually versatile enough that you can get them to fulfill both looks. Granted, I don't have any humans to put in scale with this thing as juvenile form, but it's still kind of cool that you can represent it. For articulation, this figure is a little limited. There's nothing in the head. These arms back here can rotate. They're on a swivel. They're pretty limited as well because of all the spikes on them. Claws up here will swivel up and down. And then his center leg is on a ball joint on each side, so it will swivel forward and back, and a little bit of up and down and forward and backwards motion there. So really not much, pretty much a static figure, nothing in the tail, nothing in the little legs, but it works. It's a decent representation of the character. Next up, we have the aggregate form. This is the larger version that fights Godzilla Jr. And you can see here I have it with its ridiculous alien ripoff tongue. Very long protruding tongue coming off the front. But you can pop this head off. Then we have a more normal head for it. Same great detail on the head sculpt. Yellow eyes, the great color variation on it. Very, very similar to what we had for the crab form, just bigger and more detailed. But this head has a gimmick as well. You can spin it around and then you can see inside there's a little button. So if you press that out using something like, I don't know, the jaws from the other Destroyah head, you'll see that I was slightly extending the jaw on this Destroyah head, which is kind of a cool feature. Going over the rest of the aggregate form, the neck is very nicely done. Very cool texture here with all the different plates to make up its neck. The same kind of little chest area. Very similar detail that we got on the crab form. There's little crab claws up here. All the little legs underneath and the larger legs on the outside. More spikes at the shoulders. The large kind of tendril arm looking things with all the spikes coming off of them. 2 little claws here at the back, and his spiky looking tail. This figure comes from the era in SH Monsterarts where I felt like they had a lot of ball joints and they weren't done particularly well. This figure does tend to pop apart if you're not careful, but it does have decent articulation. The head and the whole neck section is on a series of ball joints, so you can get a pretty good range of motion out of it. It'll move side to side very far, move up and down pretty well, tilt, very cool. The little crab arms are on ball joints. They're pretty stiff at the body itself, but the claws themselves will actually open and shut, which is pretty nice. They're on ball joints as well, so you can rotate them, but you wouldn't really want to. These larger tendril arms back here are on a series of ball joints, one at the base of the body, one about midway through. and then one here up at the top. All 6 legs on the outside here are articulated. They have a ball joint at the body, so you can rotate and move a little forward and back. And then at the mid joint, you can move in and out. You can also rotate there. Here's a bunch of very tiny legs on the bottom that are ball jointed both at the body and then when it connects to this claw, but they fall off so easily I don't even want to touch them. And then back here at the tail, we also have a series of ball joints, but it stops pretty early. This whole section from here on, basically about the last maybe inch and a half of the tail, is non-articulated. And then last but not least is the flying form. Very, very cool looking. This one looks a lot more like the adult in the head. You can see it now has an actual jaw to it instead of the weird kind of alien mandible thing. We have the horn on the head, similar to Destroyah. This one also done in a nice translucent orange, as well as the eyes. Some really cool paint fading effects going through the head. Same as we got before, but really nicely detailed. The underside looking like what we've seen before. Same little kind of mid-torso section. We have all the legs here folded back as he's flying. Some weird little, almost egg sac looking thing in the middle, which I'm not really sure what that is. When we get back here to the tail, we get some spikes around it that weren't there before. And a nice ridge down the back. Tail very similar shape, but the ridge on the back is much more accentuated. We have some larger kind of sub-wings that we'll see on the adult, and then the larger wings themselves. Now, I never really got a good idea of how big Flying Form Destroyah was in the film, but I always thought he was bigger than this. I always thought he was closer to the full-sized Destroyer. Now, I think I looked it up and I think I was wrong, but it just feels like this is a little on the small side for me. For articulation, we do have an articulated jaw on Destroyah, which is very nice. The neck is on a series of ball joints, so you can get a decent range of motion out of it. It doesn't look very far down, which would have been kind of cool to look down on his prey, but he will look up really well, also turn side to side and tilt. At the, I guess you call them the shoulders, there's an okay ball joint. You don't get a whole lot of motion out of the wings, but there really wasn't much in the film. All these little legs down here folded up are actually articulated on ball joints. You can move them around a little bit, but it's not an area that needs a whole lot of articulation, to be quite honest. Even these small little claws here are articulated a little bit. Here at the back, the little mini wings also have a ball joint in them, so you can move them a bit. And the tail has a few ball joints before once again becoming a solid piece for most of the rest of the tail. Another gripe I do have with this figure is the lack of accessories. You saw the display stand I had him on at the beginning. That's actually from King Kong. That's not from Destroyah. And I really feel like he could have benefited from having his own display stand, his own flight stand, especially for the price of this set. And quite honestly, I would have been happy if they would have just put a hole right here in the center of his chest and let you plug the Tamashii stand right into it. I think that would have made for some much cleaner flying poses than trying to put a big old clip around him. Sure, there are more elegant ways to make him look like he's flying, but this is what I had readily available to put on my shelf. For a size comparison, here is the aggregate form and flying form facing off against Godzilla Jr. I think the scale is decent here. I kind of think the aggregate form should be a bit larger than this. I already said I think the flying form should be a bit larger. I might be wrong on this. I'm just basing it off of my memory of the last time I watched the film, which wasn't all that long ago, but wasn't exactly this last week either. And here's the crab form latching on to Burning Godzilla. And this is actually how I display this figure on the shelf. I really like how these two fit together. Like I said, I wish they'd almost would have released a crab pack and you could have just gotten a whole box of crabs, because doesn't everybody just want a box of crabs? But I think that would have been kind of cool, so you could really beef up your Burning Godzilla display with them. But as it is, it works decently well. And here's the bunch with their final form, and it's hard to get all 3 of these on camera. I actually had to put the crab form up on Destroyah's shoulder, and it's kind of hard to tell from this low angle I had to get, but the aggregate form comes up to about Destroyah's knee. The crab form's not much larger than his head. So these guys really had to beef up quite a bit for their final battle. And over the course of reviewing this figure, I really can't remember if I've ever not recommended a Monsterarts figure before. So I'm not sure if this is going to be the first, but yeah, I don't recommend this pack. I bought this because I'm a completionist, because I want every unique sculpt out of this line. I don't necessarily have to have the repaints like the Comic-Con Explosion Godzilla or that new Godzilla 2000 that's coming out soon, but I want every unique sculpt they put out, every unique version of a character, especially ones that are in the films. But especially for the price this thing goes for online, it's not worth it. It's way overpriced. For 3 pretty small figures, you get 1 accessory and not even a flight stand. I feel like there would have been some redeeming quality if they would have better integrated a flight mode into their flying destroyer. That's kind of important for the character. So that is pretty disappointing. But if you really love Godzilla vs. Destroyah, we have everything from this film. We have Burning Godzilla, we have the 2 different versions of Junior, we have all 3 juvenile forms of Destroyah, we have the full-blown Destroyah, we even have the Super X3, and some of the freeze tanks. So while you may not actually have the numbers of things you might want, it is actually possible to buy pretty much everything from that film. And I have to say, if they did put out an army builder pack that came with 3 of the crab forms, I'd probably be tempted, just so I could bring that one scene from the movie to life even better. But the only reason I would actually recommend picking up this set is if you are a completionist on the Monsterarts line, or at least a completionist on the Godzilla vs. Destroyah stuff. And in that case, you don't need me recommending a figure for you to go pick it up. But anybody who's actually watching this thinking, should I put my money down on it? I don't think you should. I really just don't think it's worth it. Make sure you check me out on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. Also follow me on Facebook, link below. And until next time, it's been another Outside the Box Reviews, Giant Monster Mania. Stay tuned for more to come.